You believe giants always win, that absolute power is invincible, that numbers decide wars. But in 1939, a nation of just 3.5 million people completely shattered that illusion and almost changed the fate of the Second World War in a way you never imagined. Everything you learned about military strength is completely wrong. Because it wasn't tanks, it wasn't technology, it wasn't numerical superiority. What almost defeated the Soviet Union, the war machine that would later crush Nazi Germany, was something no general could measure on a map. It was pure psychology, calculated terror, and a deep understanding of the human mind under extreme pressure. Finland didn't fight to win. It fought to break something far more powerful than armies. It fought to destroy belief. In November 1939, Stalin sent 500,000 soldiers to crush Finland. He expected to conquer the entire country in 2 weeks. The whole world expected it. But what happened in Finland's frozen forests wasn't just a military battle. It was a brutal demonstration of how collective mind, the psychology of an entire nation, can become the most devastating weapon in history. And it terrified Hitler, inspired Churchill, and planted the seeds for Stalin's downfall. To understand what Finland did, you need to grasp a fundamental principle of human psychology: the illusion of invincibility. When a power believes it's absolute, it becomes blind, arrogant, predictable. Stalin's Red Army was the perfect embodiment of collective arrogance. They had been programmed to believe in Soviet superiority, in the inevitability of victory, in the crushing power of numbers. This belief wasn't just propaganda, it was the mental framework of every soldier, every commander, every strategic decision. And Finland understood something no military treatise taught. You don't defeat an army by destroying its tanks. You defeat an army by destroying its certainty. The Finns created what military psychology today calls cognitive asymmetry. They transformed every Soviet advantage into a psychological vulnerability. The Soviets had numbers. The Finns used that to create paranoia. Every Soviet soldier felt exposed among the crowd. The Soviets had tanks. The Finns turned forests into nightmare labyrinths where metal machines became death traps. The Soviets had order and discipline. The Finns responded with calculated chaos, appearing and disappearing like ghosts, attacking without pattern, without apparent logic. And most devastating, the Finns weaponized winter, not just as a tactical ally, but as a psychological weapon. They knew Soviet soldiers, most from warmer regions, would face something beyond physical cold, the existential terror of slowly freezing to death, not knowing where the next shot would come from. Let me show you exactly how this worked. December 30th, 1939. Battle of Rada Road. 9,000 Soviet soldiers, fully equipped, advance down a forest road. They have tanks, artillery, supplies for weeks. They outnumber the Finns 15-1. But the Finns don't fight like the Soviets expect. First, they slice the column into pieces, like a predator dismembering prey. They attack communication points, isolating each segment. Suddenly, 9,000 men become dozens of confused groups, without leadership, without direction. Then comes the silence. For hours, nothing happens. Soviet soldiers wait, nervous, staring at the trees. The cold penetrates, night falls, and then, from nowhere, a single rifle shot. One man falls. More silence. Another shot. Another dead man. This continues for days. The Soviets can't see the enemy, can't fight back. They just die, one by one, as the cold increases and panic spreads. The Finns called this matti, encirclement and fragmentation tactics. But what was really happening was psychological warfare in its purest form. Every Soviet soldier began to feel they weren't fighting an army. They were being hunted by something invisible, something that knew those forests better than they knew their own souls. The result? Of 9,000 Soviet soldiers, only 1,000 escaped. Not because they were massacred in direct combat, but because they were psychologically destroyed before any real battle happened. And there was one Finnish soldier who perfectly embodied this strategy. Simo Heiha, the White Death, a 5'3" farmer who became history's most lethal sniper. Over 500 confirmed kills in just 100 days. But it wasn't about the numbers. It was about the effect. Soviet soldiers became afraid to move, to raise their heads, to exist in the open. Heiha wasn't just a shooter. He was a living symbol of the invisible terror that Finland represented. But here's what makes this story truly disturbing. Finland didn't win the Winter War. In March 1940, after 105 days of brutal combat, Finland signed a peace treaty, lost territory, lost cities, and Stalin declared victory. So why did I say Finland almost changed the Second World War? Because the real impact wasn't in the war's outcome, it was in what happened after. Adolf Hitler was watching, and what he saw left him ecstatic. He saw the Soviet Union, that supposedly unstoppable war machine, bleeding against a tiny nation, saw Soviet generals making grotesque tactical errors, saw Soviet soldiers dying by the thousands because of incompetent leadership, and Hitler concluded something fatal. The Red Army is weak. Stalin purged his best officers. The Soviet Union can be conquered. This was the miscalculation that would cost Germany the war. On June 22, 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, convinced he would win in months. He based this confidence directly on what he saw in Finland. But there was something Hitler didn't realize, something the Finns knew from the beginning. Finland didn't defeat the Soviet Union because the Soviets were weak. It won because it used the unique psychology of a nation fighting for survival against a system based on fear and obedience. The Soviets were terrible in Finnish forests because they fought mechanically, without adaptation. But when they fought for their own land, when they became the desperate defenders, they unleashed exactly the same psychological ferocity that Finland demonstrated. And they crushed the Wehrmacht. So here's the devastating truth. Finland didn't win the war. It changed it by deceiving Hitler about what strength really means. Hitler saw Soviet weakness, but he should have seen something far more dangerous: the unlimited power of a nation fighting for survival with deep understanding of psychological warfare. So what should you learn from this? That power isn't about size. It's not about resources. It's not about how many tanks you have or how many men will march under your orders. Real power is understanding. It's knowing exactly where your opponent believes they're strong and turning that belief into a trap. It's understanding that collective minds operate under shared illusions. And when you break the central illusion, the entire system collapses. Finland taught the world something that still echoes in modern conflicts.
No matter how small you are, if you understand psychology better than your enemy, if you use environment as an extension of your mind, if you transform every disadvantage into a cognitive weapon, you can not only survive, you can redefine what war means. And the most terrifying part is that Stalin learned the lesson. In the following years, the Red Army transformed, adapted, became relentless precisely because it absorbed what Finland taught through blood. Nazi Germany ignored the lesson and paid with complete destruction. You'll probably never fight a war, but you will face giants, systems that seem invincible, people who believe they have all the power. And when that moment comes,